Hello everyone, welcome to UGC NET Political Science classes by Drishti IAS. I am Dr. Ashwati. So this is our second lecture with reference to our unit number 5, International Relations. So students, in the last class we have dealt with the approaches in which we have had a kind of an understanding about the growth of the discipline, as well as how idealism came about, the historical context, as well as we have dealt with the emergence of realism as well. In today's lecture, we are going to focus on next three approaches, and that is related to neoliberalism, neorealism and neo-marxism. Okay. Now, to understand neoliberalism, neo-realism as well as neo-marxism, the bestest way of understanding it is through the three models. Okay. One is the 𝐏𝐫𝐤 model for the neoliberalism, billiards ball model for the neorealism and layer-cake model for Marxism. Okay. So, when you talk about 𝐏𝐫𝐤 model, okay, this is 𝐏𝐫𝐤. Here you can see that all units are actually interconnected. Okay, 𝐏𝐫𝐤 or the spider's web we can say. Okay. So, this is the classic case of the neoliberalism in a very shorter manner that we can understand. Okay. Best way to understand neoliberalism is through this 𝐏𝐫𝐤 model. Then after the billiard ball model, you must have seen this billiard ball, billiard ball like this game table. Okay. Here what we see is that the ball represents each and every unit in the international system, that is a state, we can say talk about the countries or the states. So the inner core of the ball is very strong as well as the outer core, but yes, all these balls actually get they are smashed with each other. It's quite common in international politics that states interact, that's a fact, but they are not interdependent here like this, but rather it is a kind of a system of what we say survival, self-help and statism. Okay. Then the third one, that is the Marxism. Here for that they have this layer-cake model. Okay. So, something like this. Okay. So, this is like a cake. Now, you can see that there are so many layers for the cake, and it represents a kind of a system of hierarchy. So, keep it in mind students, always remember to follow these three models so that it will remain in your mind with reference to these three approaches. Okay. So, let's kickstart with neoliberalism. Okay. So, neoliberalism, which was actually we can say that the liberalism was marginalized in the post 1945 period because people were too much interested with the realism, the Morgenthau's principle and E.H. Carr's understanding about the interwar period. So, now marginalized during the early post 1945 period due to the failure of the liberal inspired Treaty of Versailles as well as the failure of the League of Nations. So, followed by the ascendancy of the realist thought, liberal ideas nevertheless attracted growing attention from the 1970s onwards. So, we can see that there was a kind of an emergence of attraction towards liberal ideas by 1970s in the form of neoliberalism. Now, new avatar in the form of neoliberalism. Now, how is it? So, the basic tenets of neoliberalism that we will understand it here. Under neoliberalism, the prominence is given to both low politics and high politics. Now, what is low politics? Those issues which are associated with socio-economic, environmental matters, or cultural matters also we can include, and high politics actually that is a very narrow understanding of politics which is just only limited to that of the military issues or state to state issues. Okay. Neoliberals have accepted certain ideas of the realist as well as the neo-realist. Now, what are they? First of all, they accept the anarchy. Neoliberals, they have accepted the system of anarchy in the world. Okay, that they believe that yes, there is anarchy. It means that there is no overarching authority above the states. Okay, now every other state is actually a kind of a unit in the world which are actually we can say that to some extent we can say that there is no overarching authority to rule over these states. Okay, that is anarchy. Then second one, state is a significant actor. Yes, state is obviously an important actor, but we will understand more new things, okay? They focus on utility maximization. They believe that if you cooperate, it is going to be beneficial for you. It is utility maximization. When utility word comes to your mind, you should think about the Jeremy Bentham also, the utilitarian principles also. Even your cooperation is based on utility maximization. Okay, let's say that if I am purchasing oil from you, then you take rice from me. Or, if I am taking oil from you, then you buy things like, the finished goods from my country, something like that. Okay. So, utility maximization, they are talking about more cooperation between the states is necessary. Now, states are rational and seeks to maximize absolute gains through cooperation. Absolute gains is something like you make more profits through cooperation, more interaction is necessary, okay? Just we say that, okay, if you keep a kind of an open border system, when people to people contacts are there, it will be beneficial for this, for the states to understand in a better manner. Rather than that, if you are not buying things and if you are not engaging, then it will create more security dilemma, more tensions and more confusion. So this is the basic idea. So the states are rational actors. In the idealist phase, they believe that people are rational beings. If you have a republican constitution, where if you have democracy, then the people in itself will be condemning the war. So because of the fear of the people, that the states won't go for war. These were the basic ideas that were propounded by the idealists. So they promoted democracy as essential for maintaining peace in the world. Now here you can see that states are rational actors and seeks to maximize absolute gains through cooperation. So cooperation is the key principle here. Okay. Now, an eminent scholar, Robert Jervis, he said that neoliberal institutionalism is concentrated more on international political economy and the environment. So, he is saying that the neoliberal institutions, they are actually more concerned with the international political economy, about the business, about the international corporations, how they actually work in the international system and how they are actually gaining more and more prominence. Okay. Now, it is pluralistic in terms of actors and increased dependence between them. And there is one more important thing, neoliberalism is also called pluralism. Okay. Now, why it is, we will just understand it here through Joseph Nye and Robert Keohane. So, Joseph Nye and Robert Keohane, they gave this idea of complex interdependence theory. Now, complex interdependence theory is similar to that of what we have understood here, just like this cobweb model. Okay. Now, all the units are interconnected with each other. You can see it here. Each and every unit is connected to each other, so that now you can see that everyone is interdependent. So, how can you go for war? How can you think about war or conflictual situation? You cannot go for proxy wars or causing any harm to your neighbor or your other countries, because there is interdependence. Okay. Now, going back to our lecture here. So, the Robert Keohane, he has given this, and Joseph Nye, they have given this complex interdependence theory. Increased interaction between state and non-state actors. When they are talking about non-state actors, it means multinational companies, INGOs, etc. Okay. So, they are saying that more and more interaction is there between the state and non-state actors. Recognition of multiple levels of interaction across national boundaries. Now, you can see that, there is more interaction, more and more countries are cooperating with each other, and it actually gives more a kind of an understanding about, it leads to more absolute gains rather than the relative gains, and it leads to more cooperation. Decline of military force as an instrument of statecraft. No more people actually believe on military as an option for solving the international issues or anything. Let's sit, talk and do the business. That is the mantra here. Then after, the book by Joseph Nye and Keohane, Power and Interdependence, World Politics in Transition. So this is a book by Joseph Nye and Robert Keohane. Okay. So they have given this book, they have written this book, Power and Interdependence, World Politics in Transition. This was published in 1977. Now, so then apart from the complex interdependence theory, another theory was given by Michael Doyle, and his theory's name is democratic peace thesis, and he was actually highly influenced by Immanuel Kant. And then based on Kant's two core ideas, democratic countries have republican constitutions that limit war-like ambitions. Liberal states never attack liberal states. Michael Doyle was of the opinion that yes, in these current times we come across like many wars are happening, but you don't see that liberal countries are actually attacking the non-liberal states, but you don't see liberal states attacking another liberal state. Okay, this is nearly impossible. Okay, so it means that he is of the opinion that okay, he was like highly influenced by the Immanuel Kant's democratic peace thesis, according to him, he is of the opinion that if you have a liberal constitution, if you promote democracy, then it is possible to have a kind of a it can create more cooperation in the world, it can create more peaceful understanding about concrete issues can be solved, and all these things are there. Okay, so now as we have understood about neoliberalism, like 2-3 points are there. First is pluralism. They accept that state is a significant actor in international politics, but apart from that, they also recognize the non-state actors also. They are actually also there to influence international politics. And then after, they combine both the low politics and high politics. They believe that military option is the least option for the statecraft. People are actually more cooperating in the world system through various companies, like many recent times what we see is that you don't see state to state connection. We see that many like governments are doing like business with certain companies as well, like okay, you come like in the form of foreign direct investment and many other things are there. So it leads to more and more understanding between the states. Then after, we have like they are talking more in terms of if you have more cooperation, it will lead to more happiness, more peaceful world. And they also at the another level, they have this republican liberalism is also there, propounded by Michael Doyle, according to whom those countries with republican constitutions, they will not attack each other, but rather yes, he does accept the fact that liberal states are attacking the non-liberal states. It is because of the non-liberal states are not doing good and they are actually creating security tensions, etc. Now, the second one is the neorealism. Okay. Now, here they do accept, like the realists itself, that the international system is anarchic. States are driven by self-interest and objective is to increase their power. And here you will find two types of realism here. One is the offensive realism and second one is the defensive realism, or the debate between the power maximizers versus the security maximizers. So that is why realism is often dubbed as the power politics model. Now, new thinking again emerged in the 1970s, just like the neoliberals or neoliberalism in international politics. Kenneth Walt's book name, please note it down, The Theory of International Politics, published in 1979, came as a very important text for understanding the neo-realistic and the rise of neo-realism. Now, focus not on the characteristics of the unit, but rather on the structure. Okay, so now here what is so different? Okay, now in the world you see Different types of countries are there. Okay. Smaller countries like Nauru, big countries like Russia, Canada, America, smaller countries like Burundi, Togo, Vanuatu, Tuvalu. So many countries are there in the world, right? So now, according to neorealism, they are not looking at the behavior of these units or the countries, but rather they are looking at the system in which they are interacting with each other. Okay. So now here, this is also called as the structural realism. They are looking at the structure of the international system. Now, Kenneth Walsh termed previous theories as reductionist because they examine the nature of the interacting units only. How, like, Nauru is actually like, let's think about like this, okay, how Nauru is behaving, okay, what sort of tensions they have, okay, if they have any sort of enmity and what sort of security dilemmas these countries are having. These were the major focuses of the old realism or the classical realism. They focused on the nature of the behavior of particular states here. But under structural realism, here the focus is more on what we call it as the system in which they are interacting with each other. Even the behavior is actually what we say, that the behavior is being molded, shaped by the nature of the system. They ignore the structure of the system where the actual interaction takes place. This is about the classical realists. They actually didn't think about the structure in which actually these states are interacting. So that is the reason why the structural realists, they came to discuss about the system in which these states are actually interacting. Okay. Now, it is the structure of the system in which these countries actually interact, control and constrain their actions, like what sort of actions to be taken. If you remember Morgenthau's sixth principle, he says that, that how the projection of power may vary with time, space and context, but the national interest remains the same. So, in that perspective, he is actually looking at the particular countries, their behaviors, okay, not at the structure. Now, for Walsh's theory, it contains three critical elements, and I have taken these elements from the Baylis and Smith's book. Okay. And here, one is the organizing principle, second is the differentiation of the units, and third is the distribution of capabilities. Now, organizing principle has got two principles, like the organizing principle in itself has got two elements. First is the hierarchy and second one is the anarchy. The anarchy means the decentralized realm of the international politics. It means that that there are so many countries in the world. They do accept the fact that there are so many countries, but there is no overarching authority. Okay, the hierarchy is the basis of the domestic order, it actually looks up to the domestic milieu, like what sort of countries, what sort of stabilities are there, because the internal sovereignty has its impact upon the external sovereignty as well. It is very critical. Like how, let's take a very good example like that. If you have a like a leader or the head of the government like Saddam Hussein, what will happen? Okay, he was an aggressor. If you remember, he launched an aggression on Iran. He launched an aggression on Kuwait. So in both situations, we have to understand that the organizing principle, like the anarchy is there, that we accept the fact. But the second one is the hierarchy, like that depend on the behavior of the state at the domestic level also, which has its implications on the external behaviors as well. Okay. Now, then after we have the differentiation of the units is also there, according to which Kenneth Walsh has mentioned in his book that all states are functionally similar sovereign states, like they are all functionally similar. We all are driven by our own national interest. We all have our own interest, like we never deal with, we never try to compare, play with our national interest. It is of our top interest, okay, for any country, whether it is Nauru, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Bhutan, Mongolia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, or any country, or Azerbaijan or Armenia. Okay, every other country has got its own national interest. So all countries are functionally similar, but hierarchies are there. Okay, in terms of the power as well as like the way you project your nation to the world. So the hierarchy is also there. Okay, and then after the distribution of capabilities, like fundamentally important, like what sort of distribution of capabilities that you can actually imagine. Like relative distribution of power is key to understand international outcomes like war and peace, alliance politics, and balance of power. It means that the relative distribution of power, like how you project your power, what sort of military build-up you are doing, whether you are engaged in an arms race or not, what sort of arms you are building at the domestic level, what sort of arms you are purchasing, what sort of alliances you are building. If you remember, in the Cold War period, you had CENTO, SEATO, the first one was the NATO, then after for USSR, you had another military grouping, Warsaw Pact was also there. So now you can understand, although CENTO and SEATO are disbanded, but yes, still we have this NATO is there. Warsaw we don't have right now. So now you can understand that if you need to understand the relative distribution of power according to Kenneth Waltz to understand the international outcomes like the war and peace, then after like alliance politics, then after the balance of power. His ideas are also part of the defensive idealism, defensive realism that keeps faith in security maximization. It talks about like you have to, Waltz says that states are security maximizers rather than the power maximizers, because power maximization often it proved dysfunctional as it triggers a counterbalancing collision of states. This is an idea by Kenneth Waltz. Okay, so the states are actually security maximizers. They are actually increasing their security. Okay, because the international system is, or the international politics is defined by statism, self-help, and survival. Don't forget these things. Okay, so Kenneth Waltz's ideas are part of the defensive realism. Now, John Miyashima, he has given the theory of offensive realism, according to which states are power maximizers. Okay, states are power maximizers. Now, self-help as the basic principle and uncertainty about the intention of other states actually lead states to go for power maximization. Okay, for the, let's understand, some books are here, book names are here, like written by John Miyashima. You can write it down, because in UGC NET examination, they do ask question, like you find 1 or 2 questions from international politics related to identification of books. Okay. So, Miyashima has written the following books: The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, written published in 2001, Why Leaders Lie, published in 2010, then after The Great Delusion, published in 2018. So, now you have got an idea about neorealism, that neorealism is actually, they do accept the fact that yes, there is anarchy in the international system. Okay, and they claim that anarchy puts constraints on foreign policy, and they did criticize the neoliberals for minimizing the importance of survival as the goal of each state, and they focus on the security and military issues. If you remember that for the neoliberals, their focus is both on the low politics as well as on the high politics. Neoliberalists, they are concerned that states behave over international agreements and cooperative efforts via absolute and relative gains. They emphasize on the capabilities, power of the state over the intentions and interests of the state. So, now you can understand that how states behave in under the neorealism, but yes, they have actually given focus on the structure. Okay, structure of the international system in which states interact with each other. And here, from here, you have the 2 branches of realism, that is the defensive realism that talks about security maximization, then you have offensive realism talking about the power maximization. Okay, now we reach to our 3rd leg, and that is associated with the neo-Marxism. Now here, early Marxists, they focused on like the economic analysis, then after capitalism as a system of class oppression that operated both at national and international levels. If you remember the Lenin's theory also, like how he has spoken about that, like the Lenin's theory on imperialism, which he called it as the highest stage of capitalism. And so now Lenin accepted much of the Karl Marx basic thesis, but argued that the character of the capitalism has changed since Marx published his first volume of Capital in 1867, and capitalism had entered a new stage, which he has called it like its highest and final stage, with the development of the monopoly capitalism. Under monopoly capitalism, like he is saying that a two-tier structure had developed in the world economy, with a dominant core exploiting a less developed periphery. So now you can understand that how the Lenin's theory also made a kind of a shift from the classical Marxist thinkers. Okay. Now, the neo-Marxists, they have focused on the ideological as well as the cultural dimension of the oppression as well. They were highly like, the dependency schools were like you have, like the proponents majorly hail from the Latin American and African countries, and investigation on core peripheral relations. Then we have here like, the world system theory as well as the dependency theory. So two things obviously, like, Lenin's so Lenin's ideas left a very deep imprint in the it actually influenced the dependency thinkers. So the dependency thinkers, they were not from Europe, but rather they emerged from Africa as well as from Latin American countries, who were actually facing the, they were reacting to the conditions of neo-colonialism. Okay. Now, central periphery relations that you can actually find in the Samir Amin's work also. Then after you will find another important work that is by Andre Gundre Frank or A.G. Frank's work, in which he has talked about a pyramidical structure that actually is a kind of like a relation that maintains a relation between the exploited and the exploiter. So to which he has spoken about, creation of like, a kind of a pyramidical structure by A.G. Frank. But here you have this metropoles. Then after, here you have the satellite states. They are actually the raw material providers, okay, and it goes to the core countries, or we can say the metropoles, okay. They are in they are actually located in the developed west or the northern hemisphere. Then after, another important theory associated with a similar vein is the world system theory, that has talked about like an existence of a third tier, that is the semi-periphery as well. This was developed by Immanuel Wallerstein. Core, semi-periphery and peripheral relations. So when he is talking about core countries are those the developed countries which are actually there to exploit the less developed. So he has given some features about the core countries. Like the core countries, they have democratic government, then after they have high wages, and they import the raw materials and export the manufactured products. High investment, welfare services are there in the core countries. Okay, this is the what we say that this is the core characteristics of the core countries. Okay, those who are in the developed west, we can say. Then after, the semi-peripheral countries are those which are having authoritarian governments. They export the mature manufactures, raw materials. They import the raw materials as well as the manufactured goods as well. Low wages and then low welfare services are also there. The peripheral countries, or those at the margins or the peripheries, are the non-democratic governments. Then export the raw materials, import the manufactured products from the global north, or we can say below subsistence wages and no welfare services. So actually what happens is, like, the three zones of world economy, they have, like, identified core, semi-periphery and periphery, and they are linked together in an exploitative relationship in which wealth is drained away by the core, from the periphery to the core. As a consequence, the relative positions of the zones become even more deeply entrenched, and the rich gets richer and the poor becomes more poorer. Okay. And then after, we have, like, in the neo-Marxist ideology, we have this Gramsci influenced thinkers are also there. I am not going to explain them, because in the next lecture, when I will be teaching about the critical theory, at that time I will be explaining about the neo-Gramscians like Robert Cox, as well as I will be explaining about the Frankfurt School, which were also influenced by the Marxist writings. Okay. So students, thank you for watching my video. In today's video, we have discussed about the emergence of neoliberalism, neorealism and neo-Marxism. So students, see you in another lecture. Bye.